Welcome to the CAA 2023 webinar series. Today's webinar is Furthering Your Career, Job Applications and Interviews, presented by Rosanne Shaw, General Manager, Ambulance Operations, Emergency Ambulance Services at Hato Hone St John. Thanks so much for joining us and please enjoy today's webinar.
Hello and welcome to today's Council of Ambulance Authorities webinar. My name is Mojca Biziak-Mikic and I will be your host today. Today's webinar is part of the Women in Ambulance celebrations, and we are excited to have with us Rosanne Shaw, General Manager, Ambulance Operations, Emergency Ambulance Service at Hato Hone St John from New Zealand. Today, Rosanne will speak with us on furthering your career, including discussing job applications, interview tips, and how to take the next step in your career. Research shows that the majority of women will apply for a role only if they meet 100% of the qualifications. On the other hand, we know men apply when they meet around 60% of the qualifications. I'm hoping this webinar will be able to shed some light and make applying for your next role a bit easier, and inspire you to think about your career pathways, your personal growth, and help get more women across our ambulance sector into leadership and management roles. There will be a short Q&A session with Rosanne following the main presentation. You can add questions into the chat function during the presentation or wait until we are back live. Now a little bit about Rosanne. Rosanne has spent over 20 years in the telecommunication industry throughout Europe and Australia, specializing in sales, marketing, and business management roles, including as a general manager for a division of Ericsson Australia. After moving to New Zealand, she set up her own business consultancy whilst also volunteering for Hato Hone St John. She joined Hato Hone St John and worked her way through clinical qualifications to become an intensive care paramedic working in Auckland while studying for her bachelor degree in paramedicine. She then became a clinical officer training other ambulance officers for Hato Hone St John. She taught paramedicine at AUT University whilst completing her master's in health practice before returning to Hato Hone St John as a general manager for the Emergency Ambulance Service, a role she has held for the past 3 years. Rosanne is also an officer of the Order of St John.
Please join us in welcoming Rosanne Shaw.
Good afternoon. My name's Rosanne Shaw. I'm a member of the CAA Women in Leadership Group, and I'm also the General Manager for Ambulance Operations for the Emergency Ambulance Service for Hato Hone St John in New Zealand. This afternoon we're going to be talking about furthering your career and tips and tricks associated with job applications and interviews. This webinar is really about getting the job you want, particularly if it's promotion or senior to your existing role. The content is applicable to everyone, but we're putting a focus on fostering the skills of talented women looking to advance their careers. This is important because research shows that women are far less likely to apply for a role than men, unless they meet all of the selection criteria. Women are also far less likely to ask for a referral. There is lots of data on this subject and relating to this journey. And LinkedIn, as an example, analysed billions of interactions and discovered that while women and men explore opportunities similarly, there's a clear gap on how they apply for jobs and how companies recruit them. So let's take a look. Making that career leap can be really daunting, can't it? You need the right mindset and the right approach. You need to make sure that your application stands out from the rest, and you need to impress the people in your interview, and doing those things well will land you the job you're dreaming of. Both men and women look for new job opportunities, as can be seen here, 88 versus 90%. But it's about how they get there that differs. You need to decide what you want to do, and you need to make a plan on how to get there. And you know, it's okay to change your mind. There needs to be a plan for you to follow. Look for opportunities that align with your career goals and the desired path. We can also see here that the higher recruitment rates align with the fact that women vet adverts better than men. And in doing so, we often vet ourselves out. So let's look at the journey between the start and the end goal. Women are more selective in the roles that they apply for. Why is this? Women feel that they need to meet 100% of the criteria just in order to apply, whereas men will usually apply if they meet 50 or 60%. Of those that do decide that they want to apply, if 50% of women screen themselves out with things like, oh, I didn't think they would hire me because I didn't meet the qualifications and I didn't want to waste my time and energy. It's not a mistaken perception about themselves. That's a mistaken perception about the hiring process. 22% of women, as opposed to 13% of men, think, oh, I don't think they'll hire me because I didn't meet the qualifications and therefore I didn't want to put myself in a position where I was likely to fail. Maybe, just maybe, women remember failure for longer than men. But let me tell you, being afraid to fail doesn't serve your career goals. And then 15% of women, as opposed to 8% of men, say, I was following the guidelines about who should apply. Following guidelines can become a barrier to applying. So we can see just with those three instances, 78% of reasons why women don't apply is to do with the lack of expected qualifications associated with the job. We can also say that by definition, more are inclined to make sure that they have 100% of the qualifications required. And what does that mean? It means that women are more likely to find themselves in a non-challenging position. Research before applying. So women want to know what the company culture's like and what it might be like to work for a particular company. If researching the company will help, then do that. Remember, it's okay to ask people in the company about the company. If you work there already and you're moving to a different department, have conversations within that department. If you're looking to join a different company altogether, then research the company online, go and have a look at what they do, look at their website, find out who's who in the zoo, and then contact either the recruiting manager or preferably the hiring manager and ask some questions. What that says to them is you've shown interest, that you can do your research, and it puts your name and face in front of them before the day. Once you've decided you're going to apply, then let's start the process by putting yourself on paper. And not all resumes or CVs, curriculum vitae, are made equal. You need to polish the resume, please. It needs to be brief. Recruiters may have up to 200 applications for a particular role, and reading through 3, 4, 5, 6 pages of CV is not going to do you any good. It needs to be bold, it needs to be bright, it needs to be succinct, and it needs to say who you are. So it should be contemporary as well. There shouldn't be any spelling mistakes in it. There shouldn't be any poor grammar in it. Your CV should be different for every job that you apply for. Have a look at the job description, have a look at the responsibilities associated with that job description, and then have a look at your CV and refine it so that the bullet points in your CV match the major responsibilities required within the job you're applying for. It needs to be up to date. Don't include things that'll catch you out where you read one thing in one place and then further on it says something different. So make sure that it's consistent and up to date. Highlight any previous experience. So make sure that it's appropriate for the job that you're going for. As an example, if one of the responsibilities is budget management, then ensure that in your capabilities and your experience, you've captured the fact that you've looked after budgets previously, if in fact you have. If you're putting a covering letter together, then it needs to be personalised. Don't repeat what's in your CV in your covering letter. They've already read that in the CV. The covering letter should be about why you for the job. It should be punchy, it should be why they should choose you as opposed to someone else. And then, once you've done all that, get it reviewed. Whether it's reviewed by a mentor, a friend, or someone who looks at resumes regularly, make sure that it's reviewed by someone you trust to give you good feedback. Let's get to the interview. This is the nitty-gritty of it, isn't it? So you need to ace the interview. Before you go to the interview, make sure you do some preparation. So I've said go through the position description, responsibilities, and think about what you've done that shows that you can do the main ones. Turn your strengths into skill statements. So for example, one of my strengths is I'm good at finance. Turning that into a skill statement says you can understand, interpret, and present financial information. Have some good examples ready using the STAR principle, and we'll come back to the STAR principle in a few moments. This shows that you've prepared, and it also gives you the confidence. So typical questions that are asked in terms of behavioural questions are, tell us a time when you had to deal with poor performance. You had to overcome a challenge. You had to do something that didn't align with your own values. Make sure you have good examples and never use the same example in an interview. Make sure you've got multiple examples to choose from. Think about the organisation and their values and tie these into your answers. Many interviews nowadays ask you to do a presentation. It's great as an interviewer to see something that belongs to my company in the presentation that somebody does when they're applying for a job. It says to me they've done a bit of research, says to me that they're actually honing that presentation for me. So incorporate their values or their ideas or their strategies into your presentation. Refresh yourself just prior to attending the interview. So you've put all this together, you've created a portfolio of information ready for the interview, but just the night before and the morning of, go through that information again. Make sure you know your resume inside and out. Make sure you know what you've put in the covering letter. Make sure you know what's in their PD, and make sure you're comfortable with the presentation that you've created. You need to know your strengths and weaknesses. We've all got them. Don't be afraid of them. Some people term them as areas for development. That's fine, but make sure you know them and identify what you're doing about your areas of development or your weaknesses. Think about common questions that we get in interviews, particularly in more senior levels. A common question is 30, 60, 90-day plan. So prepare it in advance. You might have a soft copy, you might have an electronic copy, you might have a hard copy, but make sure that you've got a theory in your head in terms of answering that question. The interview itself, the basics. So we're going to talk about the difference between face-to-face interviews and virtual interviews, but if it's a face-to-face interview, make sure you arrive early. Arriving early takes the stress out of things. You know, you're not worried about that traffic jam. You know that you know where to find the place. You're in the right place at the right time, and it allows you to sit down, have time, compose yourself, breathe, stop sweating, get rid of all the anxiety. First impressions. So, you know the old saying, you only have one opportunity to make a first impression. So dress to impress. Wear something that you feel comfortable in, and something that you feel confident in, and something that defines you. If you like bold colours and wear bold colours, then wear bold colours. You can see I'm wearing a royal blue, a bold colour today. If you don't feel comfortable wearing a bold colour, then wear something more simplistic, but have an accent that's a scarf or a brooch or something that says you're you. Be mindful of your body language. We know that speech and verbalization is only 7% of the message put across. The biggest part of the message that you put across is your body language. So when you walk in, walk tall, use your hands to gesture, not your body, and make sure that you maintain eye contact. That says you're listening to the people and you're directing your answers at the people. When you're sitting, sit tall, have your shoulders back. It gives you an air of confidence. When you're talking to people in an interview, you've got about 5 minutes at the beginning to create a bond. And you need to create that bond we talk about reading the room, understanding the people, finding out what you can and can't get away with. So think about that and use using people's names. So if they've given you their name, make a note of it or make a way of remembering it and use people's names throughout the interview. It's okay to have a pen and paper. It's okay to jot things down. Set that expectation by saying, I'm going to be taking some notes. So if I'm looking away, that's the reason why. And remember, when you're in the interview, an interview is a two-way process. Yes, it's about them deciding whether they want to hire you for the job, but it's also about you deciding whether you want this job and whether you can work for that person. So it's okay for you to control some of the interview, and that takes away that inferiority complex that a lot of people have, particularly women, when it comes to interviewing. You might want to say at the beginning of the interview, I've got 5 or 6 questions to ask at the end, so I'd really like to ensure that there's time to do that. That's okay. You're setting the scene. You're actually sharing the responsibility of the interview. Once you think you know the audience and you've created a bit of a bond and a relationship, that's going to direct how the interview continues from there, depending on whether they seem very straight-laced or whether it's a relaxed or an informal interview. And I mean informal, you usually get a lot more facial expressions, smiles, noddings, affirmation of what you're saying. Just depends on the circumstances. So you have to use your own intuition in terms of following the interview from there. Make sure that you listen to questions and you can paraphrase them for understanding. That paraphrasing not only says, have I heard this correctly? Is this what you're asking me? It also buys you some time to think about what your answer is going to be. Be patient. Please don't interrupt. Let them say what they're going to say. Again, if the interview becomes informal and convivial, there's almost no break between question and answer or comment and comment, but don't interrupt. If you're not sure on something, then ask for clarification. I think what you're asking is, but can I just clarify that, please? Whenever you answer a question and whatever you say it with a smile. And even if you're petrified, a smile will relax you. Also, just give yourself time to breathe, lower your shoulders, and that reduces your anxiety. Answer questions. Don't waffle. Find out what the question is, find out what it is they actually want, and answer the question. And use the KISS principle, so keep it short and simple. This gives time for them to ask follow-up questions, and it makes it more of a conversation than I've asked a question, you're giving an answer. Be a STAR. So STAR is a way of answering behavioural questions. STAR stands for situation, task, action, and result. So an example might be, tell us a time when you've had to manage a person with poor performance. So you start off by saying, so the situation was that Fred wasn't performing well. I had to sit down and have a conversation with him. Actions are, these are the questions that I spoke to Fred about. I allowed him time to give his answers. And then the result was that Fred's performance improved. So you've used that STAR principle of situation, task, the actions that you undertook, and the results as a result of it. And if you have a chance, also answer the so what question. So what? So what did that mean with Fred and his poor performance? I had this conversation with Fred, poor performance, sat him down, had the conversation. The result was that his performance improved, and what that means is that, and what that demonstrates, so you're answering the so what, that shows that I can have those difficult conversations. It shows that I recognise that the person needed areas of development and I worked with him to do that. So you're answering the so what. So what does that mean I'm bringing to your organisation? And if you can tie that back to responsibilities in the position description, even better. Answer questions honestly. If your answer's not strong, you might need to rephrase and change the focus of the answer. An example, tell us about a time when you've worked with budgets. And you may not have worked with budgets in any depth. So your answer would be along the lines of, I've not directly had responsibility for a budget, but my manager had responsibility for a budget, and she and I, or he and I, would have a conversation about the budget so I could get an understanding. And I've gone away and I've learnt about P&Ls and I've learnt about balance sheets so that I can interpret the data and I can present the data. What you're doing is you're answering honestly to say, don't really have that experience. However, I'm willing to learn, I'm hoping to learn, and I've done things to try and enable me to learn. Imposter syndrome. It's a normal phenomenon. We've all done it. We hear the term fake it till you make it. We all often think, oh, am I really cut out for this? Do I really know what I'm doing? The answer to that question should become a positive one more often. So yes, I do. Yes, I do. Yes, I really do. Make sure that you have at least 5 or 6 questions to ask at the end of the interview. The number of times that I've interviewed people and I say, so we've asked you lots of questions. Do you have any questions? And they go, no. And my thought is, oh, well, they're not really interested. Don't they want to know anything about the role? Don't they want to know anything about me? So make sure you have some questions. You may think you already know the answers, but you may not. So ask about the company. Ask about their culture. Ask about the person you're going to be working for. Ask about the opportunities to grow within that role. Ask where that role may take you in years to come. Ask about support that you may need. So make sure that you do have some questions. And the answers that they give to those questions will also give you an indication of whether this is the right job for you. You may have done some research about the company, but the people in front of you can tell you more about the company than a website. It'll also tell you about their passion. So when they start talking, if they're animated and they're passionate about what they're talking about, that gives you that bond and that feeling that they're going to be passionate for you if you take that job. It may also say to you, actually, I don't want to work for this person, or I don't want to work for this organisation. The interview is your opportunity to shine. It's your opportunity to sell yourself. My question to you is, what makes you different from everyone else? And the answer to that question should come through in your interview. Why you? Again, looking at interviews that I've undertaken in the past, when they say to me, you know, why do you want this job? I start to get excited. I want this job because I want to be able to prove something or make a difference, or whatever the reason is. Get animated, show the passion that you've got for the job. You know, why me? Because I'm the right person for this job. I've been working towards this. This is part of my career. Make yourself animated. You can get excited. Your body language can change. Show the excitement. You need to assume that everyone else applying for the job can do the job. And you need to be able to say, why should they hire you? You need to know the answer to that question. Ask for the order. This is a real contentious one. And as a salesperson in my previous life, I was taught very early, you can sell a product as much as you like, but some buyers won't give you the order unless you ask for it. And I think interviews are no different. You're selling yourself and you need to ask for the order. Now, I'm not suggesting that you say, can I have the job? That's not what you do. But it's okay to, towards the end of the interview, to say, have you heard anything during this interview that would stop you from offering me the job? And then you go quiet, because the chances are they're going to feel, don't know how to answer this one. They will either answer honestly and say no, in which case you know you've sold yourself well, you've done a good job, and there's nothing else that you could do in the interview to be able to get the job. Or they could say no and not be sincere, in which case you probably don't want to work for them anyway. Or they can say yes, we're a little bit concerned about, in which case you now have the opportunity to underpin that concern and to try and allay their fears. So it just gives you an opportunity to sell yourself that one more time if they've got any reason for concern. Above all, when you're in an interview, you need to be yourself. I've spoken to many women meetings and they're phenomenal. They go in, they run a meeting, they present, they've got absolutely every confidence in the world, and I've seen the same woman in an interview and they can't sell themselves. You need to be able to sell yourself by being yourself. If you're quite an extroverted person, then be extroverted in the interview. If you're introverted, try and bring yourself out a little bit. But remember, if you're trying to be someone else in the interview, when you're hired, they'll be disappointed. The other thing to think about is to be the person that you are, not just at work. So, many people are different when they're at home to when they're at work. And it's okay for you to bring in things about yourself in answering questions about work. Talk to your employers about your career goals, where you are, where you want to be, and things that you do outside work. What makes you relax, give yourself work-life balance. I just want to touch on virtual interviews because they're becoming more of the norm. As a person who interviews, if I've got one person who's applying for a job that can't do a face-to-face interview, then all of the interviews become virtual. And that's to ensure there's a level playing field for everybody who's being interviewed. So more and more often we're seeing interviews being conducted virtually. Let's ensure, first of all, that you have good internet connection. If you haven't got good internet connection, go and find somewhere that you have. You're better off wearing headphones because you get better audio, things are clearer, and you've got less distraction. You need to practice to see what it looks like. Are you in the centre of the screen? Are you at the edge of the screen? Are you leaning up forward or backwards? See what you look like. So practice. Make sure that you have front lighting. If you can sit in front of a window, that's fantastic. If you have backlighting, then you often get silhouetted and you don't see facial expressions as well. And obviously when we're working virtually, your face is the predominant thing that people are going to see. So either have a window in front, or if you can't get in front of a window, have a table lamp or something to give some light about 60 centimetres or 2 feet in front of you. And make sure that you're in a nice quiet setting. When you attend a virtual interview, arrive on time. So if it's a 2 o'clock interview, arrive at 2 o'clock, not early. And that's because it can be really awkward for the interviewers if the person's already in the room. So be on time, not before time. Look into the webcam. Try and have the webcam sitting at eye level or slightly above so that you're not looking down on the webcam. It makes for a more natural experience, and it also makes you sit up more right, which gives you that body language. Limit your movements, don't fidget. So I'm sitting on a swivel chair and I could be sitting here doing this, which would be very distracting for everyone. So limit your movements, but use your hands. Use a real background if at all possible. Gets rid of all that shady area around you. If it's not the best place, I'm just using my home office to do this. Hopefully you're looking at me, not at the background, but minimize distractions. Set any note-taking expectations. So as I said in the face-to-face interview, even when you're doing virtual, the chances are you're either going to be looking away from the camera when you're doing typing in, or whether you're taking notes. So set that expectation early in the piece. And then have a contingency plan. What happens if the internet goes down? What happens if the power cut? If there's a power cut halfway through. So at the beginning of the interview, it's okay to say, if we get an internet connection, can I get a phone number, or can I dial in via my phone or something like that? So we've finished our interview. The next thing is we need to seal the deal to a point where, yes, we want the job, no, we don't want the job. The first thing to do is a follow-up. Within 24 hours, send a thank you note to the people that interviewed you. Not just to one person, but the people who interviewed you. If there's nothing that's left unanswered, it could be a simple thank you for your time, really enjoyed. If you've got any more questions, or if they have asked something in the interview that you need to respond to, then make it more detailed, and incorporate the fact that you asked during the interview, you asked these questions, here are the answers, or here are examples of some of the, or here is evidence of some of the things that I discussed in the answers that I gave, something like that. When to walk away, it's a two-way thing, and you have the right to walk away whenever you want to when you're going through that recruitment process. It's not an easy thing to do, but it's the right thing to do, and it's not about doing it, it's about doing it right. It may be that you haven't heard anything for a day, a week, a month. If during the interview the interviewers haven't set the next steps for you, that's a question that you should ask at the end of the interview. When should I expect to hear back from you? That manages the expectations, but then it gives you the in. If they've said within 24 hours or they've said by the end of the week, if you haven't heard by the end of the week, on Monday morning, you can then write or phone, whatever's appropriate, to follow up and say, I haven't heard anything. And they might say, oh, we're just doing some reference checking, or we're just doing some psychometric testing, or somebody that we intended to interview last week couldn't make it till this week. But at least you know where you stand. If you haven't heard anything and you've done a follow-up and you still haven't heard anything, it starts to get that little bit awkward, doesn't it? So you need to think about how you take that next step. And I think once you've followed up twice, you shouldn't follow up anymore. Most people, if you've got to interview, will come back to you with thank you or no thank you. And it may just be that they need a little bit more time. It may be that you get to that 2 weeks or 3 weeks and think, well, if this is the way that they treat somebody who hasn't even started for them, do I really want that job? Feedback. So feedback's a really important thing. And as employers, many employers don't give feedback well. So the classic is, I'm really sorry the job was given to somebody with more experience, or I'm really sorry there was somebody more qualified than yourself. It doesn't really help you. So it's really good to ask for specific feedback, and your specific feedback should follow your journey. Was my CV up to date? Was it appropriate? Readable? How can I improve it? Did I do anything in the interview that put you off? Yes or no? What could I have done differently? So use open questions to get appropriate feedback that will enable you to grow. If you get into the position where you have applied for a lot of similar roles and you're not getting anywhere, you need to take a step back and assess the situation and just ask yourself some hard questions like, do I really have leadership skills? Have I put myself in positions to be able to manage others in their work? Yes or no? So you need to look and identify the gaps between your current experience and the role you want. You might want to consider joining organisations or project teams, or asking for new assignments to enable you to pursue opportunities to fill those gaps and to build specific skills. And if you can't seem to move up immediately in your own organisation, you might want to consider moving to another company. And there's nothing wrong with that. I've done it. I left Hatter Hunnis St John. I went out and did other things. And once I'd got more skills, I came back. Finally, accepting and declining. So if you're going to accept a position, accept with grace. Thank you very much. Next steps, what are the details? Who are you reporting to? When do you start? Etc., etc. If you're declining, then decline with grace. Thank you so much for the offer. I've decided at this point in time it doesn't meet with the direction that I want to go with. My last piece of advice in terms of declining would be, as soon as you realise you don't want the job, tell them. Don't wait for the process to continue. So in summary, choose your journey. Make sure it's the journey that you want. Polish your resume. Make sure it's brief, bold, succinct, and eye-catching and honest. Ace that interview, go in with confidence, sell yourself, shine like the star that you are, and then seal the deal with a yes or a no. I hope you've enjoyed that, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Rosanne. It was really awesome. And I think it was so important for us to have this webinar. Everything you've gone through is so relevant. And I think people just don't work on the aspects of applying, of even thinking about your career. It's, people might be just jumping, oh, this role interests me and whatnot. And that's why people don't stay long term. And people not staying long term with companies is you lose the incredible talent and that you are growing in that. So it's a loss on both sides, I find. Your thoughts on just, what would you suggest working on your career?
It's difficult, isn't it? And if you look at the research of today, you go back to when I started work and you might have one or two careers, which is exactly what I've done. And then you look at the research of today and they talk about youngsters having 9, 10 careers over a period of 30 and 40 years. And that's something we need to think about. If we start work or go to university and start work at 20, we've got a 40-year span, or even maybe longer as retirement age gets older. We've got that 40-year span to think about what we want to do. It's okay to change your plan, but you need to have a plan. And sometimes things just fall into your lap, so you have an opportunity to move. Most of the people I would guess on this call have worked in roles where you've got to plan to, whether it's run a meeting, whether it's run a conference, whether it's do a project, and you spend so much time on doing that, and that's great. This is a project. Your life, your career is a project, and spending the time to consider what you want to do and preparing yourself moving forward is so important, and a lot of people just don't do it.
I also find talking to not just your friends, but if you've got a mentor or your manager or managers sort of around you, talking to them about you and your journey and your career, it's been really interesting because I've sort of done it recently. They've pointed out some stuff that I would never thought were my skills, and I went, oh yeah, I am good at that. Oh, that definitely is going to go onto my CV. So I think that building, again, a bit of a group around you, people that support you, and one of my questions was sponsors, especially if you're looking to move within the company. What are your thoughts on that, and maybe how to go about it? Because that's a very tricky conversation, especially for women who are and you mentioned at the start, we're not good at asking for references, that let alone for a sponsor. But the higher up you go, that's what you will need eventually.
We talk about networking, and again, this is a very generalized comment, but women are not so good at networking as men are. But we also talk about, if you had a boardroom, if you had a company and you had a boardroom, who would you have around the boardroom table? And this is the people that I surround myself with. So I've got the person who's always backing me, the person who's always on my side, who always tells me what I do and that I do it well. I've got the person who always challenges me and makes me grow as an individual, and make sure that everything I say isn't true, or I will come up with an idea, they will challenge it, I'll develop the idea, they'll challenge it, I'll develop the idea, and we get to a better solution. Then you've got the stakeholders. So what you're saying, Moika, is the people that you network with, you need to have certain characteristics and certain people who will support you, challenge you, grow you, give you honest feedback, and allow you to develop as an individual.
That again falls into that you need to plan your career, you need to plan what you want to achieve. And it's very similar. I do a lot of work with small businesses and that in my other life, and I always say, if you don't have a goal, if you don't know where you're going, how on earth are you going to get there? And deadlines never like this, especially with small businesses and COVID and whatnot. It's always like a bit wiggly, but the end of the line, I'm going from here to up here. So that having that plan and thinking about it, and same with finances, you just need to work on you and your career instead of just jumping because somebody asked me to do something I didn't enjoy or whatnot.
I think early in your career it's okay to jump, because you gain skills, and again, just from my own career, I started as an office person and learned about accounting and sales ledgers, purchase ledgers, nominal ledgers, general ledgers, and get that accounting under. Then I moved into training, which allowed me to be comfortable with presenting, moved into sales, moved into marketing. And it's those skills that you learn in your former career that you can then bring with you as you go into more senior positions. So I think it's okay to move around when you're starting your career and when you're feeling your feet and deciding where you want to go, and having the opportunity at towards the end of your career or as you become into more senior positions, to bring all of those skill sets with you.
And one of the things that we've been hearing lately is, with especially paramedics, on-road paramedics, clinicians who are maybe done with their career on road, where do they go next? And in them not understanding that the skills that they have to deal with a patient, be it, an elderly, little child, dementia, like, violent, all of that, all those skills are transferable. So I think there's a piece of work around there. And again, talking to other people, but yeah, your thoughts, because you are a clinician as well.
It's a hard decision. As a paramedic, it was and still is one of the hardest decisions that I have made, and I am still making, to completely step away from clinical work. But you're right. We learn transferable skills in negotiating. The number of times as a paramedic you have to negotiate with, whether it's a parent, whether it's a child, whether it's someone who doesn't want to be taken to hospital and you recognise they need to go. So your negotiating skills become phenomenal. Distraction, changing the focus from where that person wants to talk about to what you want to talk about. Actually just talking to people, just building connections and building relationships. And if there's paramedics on the call here, we can certainly recognise when there's somebody who's brand new, out of school, not got the University of Life degree, and while they can do all the clinical things, they can't do that. Just have a conversation with someone and elicit the answers that you want. So all of those things, you can transfer from your clinical life into non-clinical.
And to me, it's also, team management. That's what you guys do day in, day out. You're working with a partner where you're working with a maybe parent or loved one and the patient and that. And then, God forbid, you're in a mass casualty scene and stuff like that. So there's so many, when you start unpacking what a paramedic does day to day, and this is the day to day, then I think they'll be able to appreciate a bit more what the skills are. For women on the call and for women who will be listening this back, and add some advice from you.
We're our own worst enemies. We really are. I believe that if you are given an opportunity, even a snippet of an opportunity, take it. If you think there's, and we'll talk about obviously moving in careers and growing in roles, if you're deciding whether or not to apply for a job, apply for it. Because applying for it gives you an extra, whatever the duration of the recruitment is, to make the decision whether or not you want to take the job. But apply for it. And the more roles you apply for, within reason, the more practice you get. And as we know, practice makes perfect. So if you get to do, if you apply for a role and you get an interview for a job that you don't really want, that's fine. There's nothing lost if you don't get it. But you've actually had the opportunity to practice the skills that we talk about. In the same way as, cannulating or intubating is muscle memory, interviewing is exactly the same. The other thing that I'd like to just put in there is make sure you've got a structured interview in your own mind in terms of how you want that interview to go. And I can't underestimate the number of people who think interviewing is a one-way street, and it's so not. It's so not. I've seen women who are phenomenal in the boardroom. I've seen them in the classroom. I've seen them in an ambulance, and they just take control of whatever the situation and the scene is. And then you put them into an interview situation and they become a wallflower. So it's your time to shine.
And you'd be the same, you'd be on the other end interviewing, same as me. And when you have a really nice flow conversation,
it's great.
Because again, that you're in your head, you're going, I will be working with this person, and I can have we've only known each other for 15 minutes and we're already chit-chatting, and this conversation is going well. I'm getting lots of information. They're asking me for information. That's what you want. When it's like, I'm asking them something and they answer yes, no statements, I can't get anything out of that.
No, it's interesting. I don't know whether you're the same, but when I'm interviewing, within the first 10 minutes, I can tell whether or not this person's going to be successful. And it is really about those first few minutes when you get the opportunity to make that first impression. If you can practice that, then practice that.
Because you're right, everyone that you end up interviewing, you've already gone through their skills, you've gone the checklist, gone, yeah, they've got what I need, or, they've got experience there. Now, for me, the interview stage is very much of how do I connect with them? What's the feeling I'm going to get out of them, rather than do you have the skills? Because I've already done that check. Yeah, and if you have to practice it, it's a tricky one. I think it's really a good one that you mentioned. Apply for roles, and even if you don't get it, it's not a failure. It's that, and I've recently heard and read something about people who play sports, especially like athletes, and that they lose all the time. They don't win every single time, except Usain Bolt. He was probably one of the few, and other ones. But everyone else is, and that's why they say they're so good at then moving on with their careers, because they know they don't see a loss as a failure. It's just part of being in sports. So I think that's gonna be a massive shift for a lot of us going. If I didn't get it, that doesn't mean that I'm not good enough, or don't have the skills in that. So that's going to be a tricky one for a lot to take on.
And the other thing to remember in doing interviews is nobody knows you better than you. This is the one product that you know more about than anybody else in the world. Nobody can sell you like yourself. Have the confidence. Have the confidence in yourself to be able to do that.
Rosanne, thank you very, very much for your time. This has been wonderful. Like I said, I've got many, many notes that I will take personally, and I'm hoping everyone else has enjoyed as well. Thank you, Mel. Everyone on the line and everyone listening later on. One of our past chairs of the Women in Leadership group said, just be brave, just do it. That's the one, and jump on and take the chance, because otherwise you'll miss it.
If you're not in it, you can't win it.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Rosanne. And to everyone else, thank you for joining us. Keep an eye out on more webinars from CAA. They will be across all our social platforms and websites. And we hope to bring you some more exciting webinars later in the year. Thank you, everyone.
Cracky day.
Thank you, Rosanne.
Thank you for attending Furthering Your Career, Job Applications and Interviews, a job guide to some tips and tricks, presented by Rosanne Shaw. You can view past webinar replays and upcoming webinar information at www.caa.net.au/webinars. Be sure to follow us on social media to keep up to date. Twitter at CAA Australasia, Facebook and LinkedIn, the Council of Ambulance Authorities. Thanks again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time.